Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Peugeot. The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by Media Clip, Advertech Printing, and Independent Photo Imagers.
Hello again and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Peugeot, and today we're joined by Jorge Olson, who is a longtime business leader, executive, marketer, brand expert. He's taken 5 companies public, and he's coming to us from San Diego, California today. Hi, Jorge. How are you today?
I am wonderful, Gary. How are you?
I'm doing great. So let's talk a little bit before we get started about your business journey, how you got started in business, because you started at a very young age.
Yes, I actually started studying influence when I was 12 years old. Okay. I took it seriously at 16, and I realized that influence transferred into economics or business. It's called marketing. And I said, really, people pay me for this? Mm-hmm. So I transitioned from just influence to specifically influence in the marketplace or marketing. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to have mentors and made it to an executive position at the age of 27, vice president of marketing. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I stayed at a C-level until I became an entrepreneur.
Okay. And you've written a few books along the lines too.
Quite a few, yes. I've written, my first published book was Build Your Beverage Empire 15 years ago. It's now in its 3rd edition. Mm-hmm. Okay. My latest book is Marketing Karma. And then I've done maybe 6 business books. Okay. A few fiction books, and I've helped entrepreneurs. I've helped 10 entrepreneurs as a co-writer. So I have maybe 15 books so far.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you always in the beverage industry as part of your background, and what attracted you to that?
Sure. I started in software. Okay. This was ERP software. Everything a company needs. And the software was $1 million plus, and it was for the food industry, accounting, production, logistics, sales, marketing, the whole shebang. Right. After that, I transitioned into wholesale distribution as an entrepreneur, and I added beverages as one of my products. Okay. I liked it because of the turns. You could sell a lot of beverages, and I was selling on my own. I was producing my own products, 1,000 fast-moving consumer goods I've developed. Right. And electronics, pet supplies, things you only buy once. And then when I did the math, I said, what am I doing? I need to do something that people will buy every day. Right. And I saw that people go into a 7-Eleven and they buy coffee every day, or they buy Monster every day, or they buy Coca-Cola every day. And I said, okay, that's my new me. And I used the same strategies that I used to become an industry expert in software to become an industry expert in the beverage industry.
Okay, so you were kind of selective. It wasn't like you had a big yearning to, be in the beverage industry as much as you saw that was an opportunity you could make an impact in because you understood the buying cycle of it.
Precisely.
So you've been involved with 5 companies. When you came time to leave companies or sell companies, or you've taken a couple public, I believe, how does that, or actually I think you've taken 5 public.
Yes.
Is that something that you think that you're kind of wired as an entrepreneur just to kind of start something, create it, take it to a point, a story, and then move on?
Yes, I think as an entrepreneur, we have the option when we start a business. If you tell me that you want to start a business right now, I would ask you, what is the exit? Right. From the first day, we just met, you tell me your idea, and I say, what is the exit? Now, you might say, this is a passion project. I don't really want to exit. It's kind of a hobby that I transitioned into a business. Perfectly fine. I have plenty of those as well. Mm-hmm. However, if it's a business you want to scale, if it's a business that you want to grow and you want to grow it fast, I always say money gives you speed. That means investment. And investors want an exit. Right. And this is why it takes you to either selling the company, which I've sold a couple without going public, or taking it public. This way, you can continue to raise capital. You can buy other companies and maybe sell a little stock yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, kind of how that relates to my market, because in our industry, we've got a wide variety of different kind of companies, right? You've got people who are in, AI startups and they're doing things. And there's other people who are among the listeners of this who are, maybe second or third generation businesses in the industry, maybe a camera store or a school photo company. And, their model was to pass it along in the family. And, as things change, maybe they've had to change their exit plan or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about, when the market changed, how you may have to adapt your exit strategy?
Sure. If you're an AI company, I'm on the board of directors of an AI company that just happens to be visual effects.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's going to have an exit. Before, right, it was a family business. Mm-hmm. And it was run as a family business for 15 years.
Okay.
And they have to adapt because what they do, which is 3D for aerospace, they told me, he's my friend, and they told me, I think we're going to be out of a job in 2 years. And I said, 2 years seems an awful long time. I think more like 2 or 3 months. So wow. They said, and they're very smart, and they're programmers as well, not just visual artists, right, or designers. They do a lot of photography, videography, and mostly 3D animation. And I told them, let's hit your clients, which is Boeing and these big companies, for investment, and position yourself for an exit so that they're happy as well. So this is an example of how a traditional, let's say, 3D or designer company is adapting with artificial intelligence, raising capital, surviving, but then positioning themselves for an exit. But let's say that you have a family business.
Right.
My first wholesale distribution company was a family business. I bought it and I grew it. I also grew tired of it because it's a lot of hands-on. I was in the warehouse all the time, getting dirty with dust and moving things, hurting my back, with things like that. And I said, okay, I'm over this. I want to do the beverages, right? I want to do beverage consulting and help companies scale. I don't want to wash trucks and visit 7-Elevens and Circle K's. So I said, I need to exit. I didn't just want to leave the company and let it go because it was selling, it was successful, and it was making me a full-time income. What I did at that time is I made sure that I had systems, first of all. If a new owner-operator is coming to the business and they have no idea what to do, you're both in trouble. Right. But if they come into a business and you have systems for everything, and now it's easy with computers. Back then, it wasn't so easy. You had to record everything, write everything down, take screenshots of everything. No SOP software like today. Right. So I would encourage these small business owners to develop systems for accounting, for sales, scripts, a list of their customers, pricing, how to buy product. Once they have their systems, they can put their company up for sale. There's a lot of different websites that allow you to list your company for free, and they take a commission from the sale.
Right. Now, most businesses don't sell, right? I mean, that's one of the problems that people have when they experience selling their businesses. I think, some people say it's as high as 80% of businesses that are listed for sale don't actually sell, right?
Yes.
And I think part of it is because of what you just said. People don't have a business that's actually transferable, right? They don't have the processes in place. They don't have the documentation in place because it may have just been like, we've always done it that way. And here, just buy my store and move on, right? So I think you've hit on a great point. And actually, I've had other people on the podcast talk about business sales to do that. But I don't want to talk just about business sales. I also want to talk about kind of building your personal brand, because that's something that you've been focusing on in the last few years, and how that kind of helps your overall business is building your personal brand.
Yes. All of these companies that I've sent public, I've raised over $100 million. Mm-hmm. It's all through personal branding. Everything. Since I received or I got my first job and then I ascended to vice president, I did it with personal branding. My second job, which was vice president of business development for a project management software, personal branding. The way I started my wholesale business, I positioned myself as a wholesale expert. I even wrote a book on it. Mm-hmm. Beverages, same thing. Position myself as an expert. If you want to sell your business, position yourself as an expert. If you want to fund your business, if you want customers, if you want anything, position yourself first. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the issue. Most small businesses want to seem larger. So they hide behind the logo because they see other companies doing that, like Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Mm-hmm. However, and if you go to a master's program, an MBA, they will give you all of these case studies from Fortune companies. Right. Well, guess what? We are not Fortune companies. Right. So they would have to teach us how those companies started, right, in order for us to understand how to scale. And right, they all started with personal branding. Nowadays, personal branding is more popular because we see some of the largest companies, especially in technology, where the CEOs are on TikTok, YouTube constantly. Mm-hmm. So you associate ChatGPT, NVIDIA, Microsoft, and these Apple and all of these big companies with the person. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, that wasn't a thing when I was right, a kid. It right, is now, so it's much easier to explain to people what they need to do. Mm-hmm. Instead of, let's say, I used to see this a lot. People would open a LinkedIn profile and put the logo instead of their picture.
Right. Yeah, you don't see that so much anymore, but absolutely.
No. So this is the beginning of personal branding. Mm-hmm. You are the brand.
Right. So what do you mean by personal branding? I mean, obviously we know what branding is. What are some of the attributes you think that you can actually put forth that are useful in personal branding? Because everyone's is going to be different, right? Because not everyone can be the same.
That's exactly right. I think there's two major points that everybody, no matter what the business, would need to focus on. Mm-hmm. The first one is your industry. Whatever your industry is, photography, videography, or AI, or any other business, is you need to position yourself as an expert first in that industry. I did it by writing. Now I do it with a lot of videos. I still write. My goal is a book a year. However, social media helps me a lot because even if I'm not writing a book, I can do 3 or 4 videos. And if I'm eloquent and I know what I'm talking about, people will see it and they will call me without reading the book. They would just say, I saw your video. I like how you speak. I think I know you now because I developed a rapport through the video. Sure. Let me call you. So your personal brand starts with your industry and then thought leader. Now, what does that mean? Because I see this used a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of overused, actually.
It's overused. And back when we were doing branding, what it used to mean was where you are outside of your industry. For example, if your industry is photography and you're doing videos on editing or buying equipment, or maybe even which lens to buy next, that would be industry, right? Industry related. But then if you step a little bit out of that, maybe you went on vacation. You still take your camera, you're still taking pictures, but then maybe you talk about the view and what it means to you and what it means for you to travel and to have the time and the money and the energy and the health to travel. And you meditate on it. Now you're a thought leader because you're thinking, you have mindfulness behind it. Right. So let's take the word mindfulness and put it into an external view. You're externalizing your mindfulness in an article, in a video, in a blog post, in a LinkedIn post. I think that's what being a thought leader means to me in personal branding. Now, why would we do that? Because you can't hit everybody with the industry all the time. You need to establish an emotional relationship with your customers. And just talking about specs is not going to do it. You need to go inside for that.
Right. I guess the challenge I think some people would have is maybe this being a subject matter expert, which is what you're talking about, is all they're suited for. Maybe they're not much of a thought leader, right? Yes. I mean, not everyone can be, a philosopher, right? Yes. So is that okay just to be in your area and be an expert in, which lens to pick?
Absolutely. It can be local. I can be in San Diego and take my camera and go out. I like restaurants. I like rooftop bars because I'm in San Diego, so I can go and do some reviews with photography on these bars, but then I can talk about how cool it is to go out. So now you're hitting both. You're hitting the photography and you're hitting the equipment and of course what it means to you. What's going to happen is people are going to start reaching out to you. Can you come and photograph my place?
Right.
They'll give you free food, free drinks, and pretty soon money as well. So this is a very localized way of gaining influence in your community, being a pillar of your community, and then people looking out for you. And we're not for everybody, but you're going to resonate with somebody. That's the client that we want. We want the clients that appreciate us because that means they're going to come back. They're not going to negotiate price and they're going to prepay, which is what I like.
So how do you keep the creative piece of it alive, right? Because, you know, most people think they've got one or two like statements or what have you, but you got to keep this alive. You got to keep reinventing, you know, your viewpoints and your content. How do you do that?
Yes, I think that's an incredible question. And everybody is different. In my world, I grew up in creativity. No business, no money was discussed in my house. Art, literature, philosophy. I had 10,000 books in no money, but 10,000 books in my house. So it was all about creativity. Right. I studied art, not business. So everything that I do it from a creative point of view, from a storytelling point of view. The first thing that I would say is, if you want to be more creative, what are you putting inside of your head? For example, are you only reading business books? Or are you also reading novels and stories and things that have to do with creativity and fiction? Right. One of my friends, which has a very successful marketing company, branding and marketing company, more visuals than anything else, called me one time at 12 o'clock at night. And he was in a panic and he told me, I lost my creativity. I don't know what to do. I'm not creative. They're going to fire me. And, you know, he was in a panic. Right. I was up at that time. And I said, well, let's start with the simple things. What are you reading? And he listed 5 business books off the top of his head. And I said, what about fiction? Well, I don't read fiction. Okay. What movies are you looking? Well, I don't watch movies. Okay. How about Netflix? Or well, documentaries. I said, okay. The answer is, it's so simple. You're not going to believe it. Read novels, go watch science fiction and fantasy films or programs. And then you're going to have an overload of creativity. Your brain is going to start being reprogrammed and it's going to start having these ideas. Oh my God, I like that dragon. Maybe I can do a logo about a dragon or a story, or my client needs something. I'm going to do a spiff on Game of Thrones for his next campaign. So then he called me a week, not even a month after, a week after, and said, that was a quick fix. How did you know to do that? And that's because you're filling your brain with numbers. Well,
and the thing is your brain needs to build new pathways all the time. That's what needs to happen.
Exactly. And then I would take it further. Write. Whatever you can write. Fiction, a story, your story. Write a sales letter. Just write. The act of writing is phenomenal for building creativity. Draw. I can't draw. That's fine. I can't draw either. And I draw every day. I have a goal of drawing something, even if it's in a little notebook like this one that I have in front of me, that I draw some mushrooms and some little it's a pocketbook, right? Because I said I need to be creative. I'm going to draw something. And then pretty soon my brain is filled with creativity and I have to record myself because I have an idea for a novel and all of these other things. So yes, you're absolutely right. We need these new connections, these new neural pathways to be bridges and tunnels and be hyper connected with each other. Because what people don't get is that once you build these connections, You can use them for whatever you want, not just for creativity. You can use them for whatever you want, for business, for numbers, for memory. So build those pathways.
When you're looking at like building your personal brand, what are common mistakes people make with it?
Ooh, yes. The first mistake is wanting to associate with the business from the start. Saying, this is my name and this is what I do. Think of when you're networking and you introduce yourself to somebody. Or think of it when you go on an airplane and somebody's sitting next to you. They have their headphones ready and they don't want to be bothered. And they have a movie queued up. You say, I'm not going to bother this person because obviously it's a 5-hour trip maybe. Like I used to go to New York to visit investment bankers once every other week. So 5-6 hours on the plane. But you want to be polite and courteous and you introduce yourself with your name, right? Hey, this is my name. That's it. But then maybe they say, this is my name. And they say, what do you do for a living? And maybe I say companies public and raise the money. And then I see the headphones go down and I see their laptop closes and then they position their body where their torso is facing me and they say, tell me all about it. And I go, what happened to your movie? Well, I didn't mention the company. I didn't mention anything else, but I know what's going to be a trigger and it's a solution. I help people write books. If you're in the visual industry, I have people position themselves as industry leaders, starting with their portrait. I take power portraits of people so they look even better than how they look at themselves. Well, these are all ways that you can position yourself. Now, you need to turn that into a headline. Think of the who cares, right? You're sitting and do this exercise in your brain. I actually teach this exercise when I'm doing keynote speeches. I tell people to do this exercise for real, to write it down. You're in an airplane. What's going to make you say, okay, good, and then you put your headphones on? And what's going to make you go, what? I was just looking for that. I write books. Oh my God. I have a dream of writing a book. How can I do it? How did you do it? Those are all headlines that get over the who cares.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Marketing is a puzzle. You can either give into the confusion or learn to love the solve. On the Axiom's Real Talk About Marketing podcast, guests like Aaron Schaefer of GM share how to manage challenges.
Make sure that you're not fixed in terms of what you're thinking about. The team's going to change, and the way teams operate are going to change. COVID was a great example of that. The industry is going to change. Are cookies going away or not? That was another great example of that. And so how do you continue to evolve as the space evolves?
Guests from HP, The Trade Desk, and Databricks share thoughts on today's marketing landscape. Find Real Talk About Marketing on YouTube, Axiom.com, or wherever you hear podcasts.
And then people see you for something else, not just a brand, not just a logo, not just a company, but somebody who has a story. It's all about the story. Our brain is wired for 250,000 years to learn, communicate, and build rapport through stories. We forget that. So you need to tell a story. In this case, this was more of an elevator pitch, right? You tell one sentence, but then you expand. You take that expansion and you really work on it. It's not just that you write it and forget it. You write it and then you write it again. Maybe you get an editor. Maybe you ask AI to help you with it. Take it and then you use it on your LinkedIn headline. You use it on your emails. You use it when you speak with people. You use it all on your business card. You use it all the time. And this is how you avoid the mistake of, I'm a lawyer. I'm a photographer. I have a photography store. Yeah, that's not sexy.
It's interesting. So there's a lot of like self-evaluation there because you have to be really truthful with yourself, right? Because part of what you're talking about is you got to be authentic with your branding, right? I mean, you can't be overselling yourself or saying something that's truthful. So you have to be at least self-aware enough to know what your strengths are and maybe what your limitations are.
Gary, that's exactly right. And let me tell you, speaking of stories, let me tell you a quick story.
Sure.
When I was doing a lot of keynote speaking, my mom would go when I was speaking locally in San Diego or even in Tijuana on the other side of the border, because I speak Spanish. And she would hate it that I always told the audience every mistake that I've made. Why do you need to go up there and tell people that you failed in this and that you're bad at that and that you made so many mistakes? And because number one, it's the truth.
Right.
And I'm not afraid of making mistakes. I'm not afraid of failure. I hated that in school you have an F for failure. In Mexico, where I went to school, it's a 10-point system, right? You get a 10, which is 100% like an A, and then it goes down, but no failure. They don't use that word. In many countries, they don't use that word. We start teaching kids, future entrepreneurs, that failing is bad. Failing is fabulous. F is for fabulous, not for failing. So I think failure, it's the quickest way to success. Fall and fall forward. Learn, of course, read, right? Read a lot, learn from others, learn from their mistakes, learn not to make those mistakes, even if you just read it. That's an incredible skill when you can not make the mistakes of case studies that you read. But you're going to have to try it and you're going to have to fail. And being authentic, as you said, is key, including telling your audience, your customers about your failures. Maybe that's the most important part. One of my mentors, which is a very famous copywriter, Dan Kennedy. I was the chief marketing officer for his company for some time. And he used to get on stage and said he was a recovering alcoholic.
Right.
And then somebody asked him, why do you do it? And he said, because I get every former alcoholic as client, just like that.
Right.
Because they get it.
Right.
And the other people don't seem to care, so they don't hold it against me, he said.
Right.
So why not? And it's the truth, right? It's the truth.
Sure.
So yes, you're absolutely right. Being authentic is important. When you write about your failures. Your hero's journey, which is the way that I would like everybody to position your personal brand as a hero's journey, where you are the hero first, but you turn into the sage, magician, Jedi, whatever you want to say. And then your customer is the hero in the hero's journey. The hero fails.
Right.
Hero fails in every hero, in every movie, every book, every story. The hero fails. So talk about your failures, write about your failures. People will love you for it.
So your latest book is about selling without selling. Can you just kind of touch on that? Because when I read that, I was like, it's a very interesting approach. And it's, what do you mean by that?
All right. So let's start with the result that you might get, which is the results that I get. And it goes something like this. Somebody calls me on the phone and says, I already know who you are before I can speak. I already know who you are. I already know what you're about. I feel I know you. I know how much you charge. Here's my credit card. You can charge it. So they prepay. They don't negotiate. They appreciate me and my time and the value that I provide. I don't have to explain it. So that's the result. That's what we all want. Customers that are high-end customers. They don't give me problems. They don't complain. And they give me the credit card up front. Now, how do you get there?
Right. That's the point.
I call it marketing karma.
Okay.
And I got there, and you get there by sharing information and giving value. By being authentic, talking about your problems and your failures like we talked about, and telling your story while providing value in that story. In other words, not features and benefits.
Right.
A story. For example, I grew up in Tijuana with no running water and no electricity, and I made it to vice president at 27, retired my mom and my grandma, who worked all day. They knocked doors to sell business cards and printed material, and I called them with my first check, and I said, we're rich. We weren't, but I thought we were rich. Called the electrical company and put some electricity. We're rich, right? It was That was my greatest trump. That moment for me is the most important moment in my business career. And I was working in Germany, and I sent 50% of my check to my mom and my grandma, and we all live with that 50%. They could live with the 50% in Mexico, and I could live with my 50% in Germany. I had a company car and apartment. That helped a lot.
Yeah.
That's one of my origin stories that I just told you in a minute. It usually takes a whole keynote, but I just told it to you in a minute. So I start with that, and that's part of the story that I give. When I tell the story, of course, I say how I did it and how I got there. And the person who hired me was my marketing karma. I couldn't get a job. I graduated from San Diego State. I lived in Tijuana and commuted daily. And I had this thing which is cultural, and you learn at home, like in the Deep South, which you're nice to everybody.
Right.
And I invited everybody home, and I invited everybody out. And I was teaching at a language school, and I got international students that were flying from all over the world to San Diego. Later, I found out to play golf, not to learn the language, but because the company paid, they went to learn the language. And I taught doing business in Spanish and doing business in English for minimum wage. But I saw it as an opportunity to meet people. And my classes were something like, oh, you're the CEO of Deloitte & Touche? Tell me all about it. And then I would shut up and just listen to their life story and learn from them. So I said, oh my God, they're paying me to learn from these Fortune 500 CEOs. That's fantastic. And then I would say, want to go to Tijuana and eat some good Mexican? They would say, yeah. So I would take them out. I would show them all over San Diego, all over Tijuana. I never expected anything to come of it except for friendship. But that's not the way karma works. Karma doesn't care whether you want something or not. It's going to give it to you if you have karma coins, let's say.
Right.
Of course, what happens was one of these guys said, you know what? You're the kind of guy that I want in my team. You do everything over the top. You treat me with so much love and respect, and you just met me. If I had 10 guys like you in my team, I would rock. So you're going to come live in Germany. I couldn't find a job, right?
Yeah.
You have a job guaranteed. You don't have to apply. You already went through the interview process, which was, going out to eat tacos and some tequila in Tijuana. He hired me, and he was my first big mentor who helped me get to six figures in my 20s, vice president, then CEO, then entrepreneur, etc. And it was all because I was nice. Now, okay, I prepared myself before. I read a book a day, but a lot of people do that. A lot of people are prepared and study and have the experience and fall, but they're missing the marketing karma part. They're missing the gentleness of heart, the kindness that you need towards others, so that you can accumulate this world of good faith where people that you want, right? Because now you will attract the right person to give you an opportunity. A client, it can be a mentor, it can be a supplier, it can be a friend, it can be an investor as well. So that's the way I did it, and that's the way I do it to this day.
And you've done it multiple times.
Multiple times across multiple industries.
So where can people go for more information to learn about marketing karma and, all your various stories you have to tell?
Sure. I have free webinars and newsletters because it's karma, right? And they can go to jorgeolson.com, JORGEOLSON.com, subscribe to my newsletter, and then they will get my frameworks, my webinars, everything that I have. They'll get everything.
Nice. Well, thank you, Jorge. It's been great to meet you, and best wishes on your continued success, and get going on business number 6. Let's get going.
I'm late to the game. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.deadpixel.com. thedeadpixelssociety.com.